Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, From Insight to Action, How Engagement AI is Redefining the Advisor-Client Experience. I'm Dylan Angner, Marketing Specialist of the Oasis Group, and I'll be your host today for this insightful webinar featuring John O'Connell of the Oasis Group and Babu Sivadasan of Jiffy AI. Together, they'll explore what engagement AI actually means, why the race to build data lakes may be slowing firms down, and how wealth management's most underserved moment is finally getting the technology it deserves. For a quick introduction to our speakers before we jump to the conversation, Babu Sivadasan is a serial entrepreneur with deep experience building and scaling public companies, backed by a strong engineering foundation. Prior to co-founding Jiffy AI, he co-founded Investnet and Stamps.com, helping shape category-defining platforms in financial services and commerce. An active angel investor and mentor, Babu supports startups across Silicon Valley and India. He is passionate about driving digital innovation and applying technology to solve complex business problems at scale. John O'Connell is the founder of the Oasis Group, a leading consultancy for the wealth management industry that offers award-winning consulting services, industry-leading research, and compelling on-demand training. A recognized thought leader on artificial intelligence in financial services, John has spoken at over 25 AI conferences and regularly appears in wealth management press and media. One more thing before we get started, we'll be leaving all the audience questions to the end. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature or the chat box down below. With that, let's get into the discussion. John, this first question is for you. You speak with wealth management firms every day, and you've sat on multiple agentic AI panels in recent months. What's the most common question you hear from advisors when the topic of agents comes up? And what does it tell us about where the industry actually is right now?
Well, thanks very much, Dylan. I think part of what we get a lot when I present is number one, what's the difference between an agent and like a workflow, right? And there are really big differences between the two. So a workflow is going to be a series of steps or tasks that you're going to kind of string together. Think of it like a digital account opening or a workflow where you're going to read a document and then you're going to take that document, you're going to interrogate it to get data out of it, and then you're going to maybe take that data and put it in your CRM. Those three steps are not an agent. If you string them together, it's one bucket of work. That's really what an agent is. So the process of reading a document, getting the data out of the document, and putting that in your CRM, that's an agent. And then a lot of people get confused to say, well, if that's one set of tasks, what if I take the data and I put it into, for example, my financial planning system? Is that a second agent? And the answer is no, not necessarily. It could still be the same agent. You're taking the data that you've interrogated once and you're just putting it in two different places. So I think people get confused around this idea of agentic AI and they think that I don't know, it's some mystical thing that we've all thought of, right? And what it really is it's just a task. It's a task that you would, if you can explain it to an intern or to a junior analyst how to complete this task, you could probably explain how to build an agent around that task. So I recommend for a lot of folks that are considering, well, do I have an agent? What do I have here? How do I get started on this? I would suggest open up your favorite large language model, start chatting with the large language model to map out the steps that you need to complete that task. Save those in a markdown file so that you've got a pretty good running idea of what those steps look like. Put it aside for a while and then come back to it maybe a day or so later and say, did I really capture everything here? And if I did, now you're on the road to possibly building your first agent around this. Um, and then once you've got ideas around a couple of agents, now you really need to think of an orchestration layer around these agents, and that's a completely different topic that I'm sure we'll get into. But if you can think of how to explain this to a junior analyst, you can pretty much explain it to a large language model to start outlining what an agent could look like.
Yeah, only thing I would add, John, is the exception handling and the ability to make non-predetermined activities, that are defined already anticipated and defined with agents. You're able to do a lot more, of unanticipated things. That decision making can be more automated, right? Now, so and that is a key difference as well. So it has workflows with more brains is how I define
I like
it.
I like that workflows with
Yeah,
more brains. I like that one
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, exactly. So we've been in this space for a long time, like that. So we've seen the evolution. So agents are more like the next evolution of workflows. So with more intelligence, if you will.
I would agree. I would agree completely. I think that, for to a large extent, right? And I like that positioning. Really, agents are that next evolution of workflows.
Yeah,
We see so many firms that come to us and they're like, "Well, I've built an AI agent," and you look at them, and you
yeah,
go, "No, you've kind of automated a workflow,
yeah,
right?"
yeah,
When you put that intelligence into the agent, that's
yeah,
when it really transitions from being, "I've automated some sort of workflow, I've automated these steps," to I've put intelligence around this, and that really is a good bellwether, if you will, of well, I've transitioned now from just a workflow automation to
yeah.
an agentic capability.
Yeah. Now, what you would have automated 70 to 80% now becomes more like 95 to 98%,
Yes.
so I use this example all the time. If your onboarding system, if you type in a client, Osama bin Laden, does it let you through? I'll tell you, most of the systems will simply take it. Now, is it reasonable? Right? No,
Yep.
is that a reasonable client, or and the agentic system should have applied that reasonableness, right? And at every level, right? Now, I just took that as an example, which is just one field, right? Now
Yes.
that you collect. So that level of reasonableness applied at every level, and making decisions around that, and these are not things you have to tell every step, right now. So that's where agents really become really useful.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Babu, you've coined the term engagement AI to describe a category focused specifically on the advisor-client interaction rather than the back office. What does that actually mean, and why does that distinction matter for how an advisory firm thinks about where to apply AI first?
Yeah, so we use engagement AI more broadly, not just the advisor-client interaction. It is the advisor-home office interaction, and if the home office is directly communicating with the end investor, so any interaction that you typically engage in, and that's what we define broadly under the engagement AI. See, at the end of the day, what happens is, the investments has become a commodity, if you will. It's very hard to generate alpha, but but what you can generate alpha on are other things, the financial planning, the asset allocation, the tax planning, etc. Where you can generate alpha, and that to do that good job there, right? You need to be actively driving the engagements, so being able to and what the clients actually remember would be those engagements or interactions as well, so how you can elevate that experience. Gone are the days, where you can just afford to meet with the client once a year, and just hand over a piece of paper, or a report. That is not good enough. Clients are demanding more, 24 by 7 access to information, which is a given, right? Being able to answer questions, as and when they ask, not getting back after a week, and when you meet with the client, you have all the information that is contextual, that is essential to have a good conversation or good engagement with that client in that moment. Being able to be more aware, and have a very productive engagement at every point of interaction, right? Whether it is a meeting, or whether it is just a simple question coming in by text message, or an email. So clients are going to engage with you on multiple channels of communication, because there are multiple channels of communication, and depending on where you are, like, you may prefer to communicate with the advisor that way. So now the advisor has a problem, right? Because you have to support multiple channels of communication, and telling the client that, okay, well, I won't receive a text message from you will not be a good thing, right? Because ultimately it's the client's preference, right? And common tools and technologies are prevalent, and people would want to engage with those, so what you can do is, be able to respond in a multi-channel capacity, and being able to respond effectively, right? And have meaningful conversations, and have all that information at your fingertips, when you're having those conversations, and being able to dynamically illustrate, like, when a client, because people love illustrations and, things like that, when they ask a question, okay, let me show you how it would have worked, right? And use every opportunity to educate that client, right? So all of this, that front end interaction, the elevated experience, that you want to give, whether with the client, where when you are in person or when you are away, like, it doesn't matter, right? Now, so being able to give that powerful experiences, that's what we refer to as engagement AI, and that includes meetings, in-person meetings, by every interaction that you have, every phone call that you have with the client, every communication that you have with the client, and being able to be thoughtful and informed, and adding value to that client for every interaction, so that they remember every interaction that you've had with them. And that's what engagement AI is all about. And it's all elevated by that AI backbone, unified data, and unleashing those experiences on top of that data. That's how we do it.
I think it's a really interesting way that you position that, right, Babu? It's a lot of people, we're in technology, so a lot of times we'll talk about an agentic AI, right?
Yeah,
Take the simplest form of this though, right? I mean, if you think about it, people went the 2025 was the year in the note taker, right? Everyone
yeah,
went for
yeah,
note takers.
yeah,
What did the note taker really do though? It didn't make the advisor's life easier in taking notes. That wasn't the purpose of the note taker. The purpose was to elevate the client experience. The client tells you something once and you capture it and you can act on it. You don't have to go
yeah,
back to the client to say, could you do me a favor? Could you repeat what you said the
yeah,
last time we met a week ago? Nobody wants that, right?
yeah,
So I think a lot of people got caught in this trap of, well, the note taker makes my life more efficient as an advisor. It doesn't. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to drive a better engagement with your client.
exactly.
It's so that you don't have to go back to your client and ask the same question twice. It's
Yeah,
so that you can be present in the meeting
yeah,
and listen to what the client's saying and ask that insightful follow-up question as opposed to writing down what they just said a minute ago.
yeah,
Right? So the purpose of this technology, and I love the way you're saying this is engagement AI and not agentic. The purpose of the technology is not to have an agent to make our lives easier. The purpose is to have this technology drive a better client experience and a better engagement with your client. So
yeah,
when you've got these folks that are out there saying, well, I don't know where to start or I don't know what to do with agentic AI, try not to get wrapped up in the technology. Start thinking about how do I leverage this technology, these capabilities to drive a better outcome for my client,
yeah,
right? And you made a really great point where you said, it is very difficult to generate alpha in the market today, right? That's why we've seen hedge funds kind of going away. It's not that easy to generate alpha. So how do you go about generating this capability moving forward? And it really does come down to agentic AI or leveraging it comes down to leveraging engagement AI. It comes down to how do I leverage this technology to drive that better outcome?
yeah,
I think it's a great way to position it because as technologists, I think we get everyone trying to wrap their head around agents.
yeah.
And really it should be just how are you driving a better client experience? What are you doing with
That
the technology to do that?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how you positioned it very well.
Yeah, that's a great point. John, I'll ask this next question to you. There's a pattern you've been flagging with firms where they've embedded their workflows inside their CRM or wealth platform. Why is that a problem, and what does a firm lose when it goes down that road?
Yeah, so I'm pretty well published on business process management and what that means. So let me take you outside of the wealth management industry for a second. Outside of the wealth management industry, your workflows are portable. You have the ability to have one CRM today, and if that doesn't work, you disconnect it and connect a new CRM, and your workflows still work. You own the process flow. Why? Because in many cases, it's not the data you're capturing, it's the process that drives the experience for your customer, right? So you see this very commonly outside of our industry in manufacturing, in healthcare, in the legal space, where the process is really the differentiator. So if the process is the differentiator, why would you lock that up in a proprietary technology that you can't move? Right?
Yeah.
So what we find today, unfortunately, with a lot of wealth technology is you build your workflows in your favorite technology of choice. And then you say, I've outgrown that tech, or I want to replace that tech. And what do? You throw those workflows away and you recreate them in another technology, which is also not portable. So when you outgrow that one, what do? Well, you throw it all away and now you do it for the third time. You recreate everything. When you have workflows that are outside of a proprietary technology, you do get that plug and play. Now, outside of our space, many times we call that middleware because it sits between, it's the middle between two applications or a database and an application. It's middleware. This has been around, by the way, for like decades, right? We had the concept of client server technology. The client and the server were separate. Middleware came out of that space, and middleware sits between two application points or an application and data. Middleware is where you put all your processes, right? So what I recommend to a lot of firms, especially large firms, um, is that they take their processes and really examine, do I want these locked up in a Salesforce, for example, or do I want these in a middleware layer where I can control what that experience looks like? Because that client experience is embedded in my processes. Take an RIA, for example, that focuses on, doctors. Let's just take it really simple. They focus on doctors. Well, your entire client onboarding experience is going to be geared towards how are they managing perhaps school debt from medical school as well as saving for retirement. How do you take into account when, if they're buying into a partnership, a doctor partnership, where they're launching their own office, you're funding that while also taking into account their retirement capability. Your entire process, your financial planning process, your client onboarding process, your investment thesis is geared towards that person, towards that niche, towards that ideal client profile. So all your processes are driven by that ideal client profile. Why tie them up in a proprietary technology and then have to throw them away if you move? So you really need to consider if the client experience is truly a differentiator for you, and we've already talked about that market alpha is probably not. If the client experience is truly your differentiator, then your processes are driven by that. And you need to own those processes just as much as you own your data. And if you don't, it's going to be very painful if you want to change. It's going to be very painful to maintain these over a long period of time. And ultimately, I think you're going to lose that differentiation.
I mean, well said, John. I would like to add a few additional comments on that. So traditionally CRMs have been a horizontal product. So they've scaled very well, but not getting too deep into the vertical knowledge, right? So it is much easier. You can build something and you can sell to the world. But in the changed AI world, what happens is, so you have to go deep, right? Now, so you have to, the meaningful elevation in experience, etc., comes from not just, being on the periphery on the front end, but going deeper and being more contextual. And traditionally, CRMs have been weak in the mid office functions, if you will, right? And obviously zero back office expertise there, right? So if you're building workflows, that are like, okay, you how you nurture your leads and follow through on it, CRMs are a great place for those kind of things. But when it comes to onboarding experience, every service request experience, those kind of things, that belongs in that process layer and middleware layer, because CRM is just one of the 7 or 8 systems, that represents your tech stack. So you need a layer that orchestrates them all, right? And that's where we find more lift, when you go deeper, right? And you go, there are about uh, depending on the size and complexity of the firm and service model, there are about 40 to 70 different processes, that happens, right? And you need a way to visually model them, and understand them, and measure and manage each and every step in those, like, so that you can operate an efficient operating chassis, if you will.
I just want to make one more point, and I appreciate kind of where you're going with that, Babu. Like when you think about it, traditionally, a lot of firms have tried to solve these problems with a data lake or a data warehouse, right? Having your
Yeah,
data in one place is good, but that data without context is kind of useless.
yeah,
What drives the context to that data? It's the workflow.
yeah,
Without the business process, the data is just data that you've collected. It doesn't mean as much without the business process around it, right? Because that provides the context around the data. So, I really do look at a lot of folks that are still locked in with proprietary process flows or process flows they're unable to make them portable. And they've built a data lake or a data warehouse on top of it, but they haven't actually solved the ownership of their process. They haven't solved that contextual problem. So what you find is they've got data lakes, and then if you change from one platform to another, what happens to the data that's in your data lake? Well, there's this huge mapping exercise to be able to now map it to what the new operational data store looks like, or it just simply becomes orphanized, right? And now it's still sitting in the data lake, but there's no context on top of it. So there's no way to really use that data effectively. To Babu's point, you can't go deep now because you don't have that context around the data elements themselves. So it's impossible to be able to go deep on it because you don't know how you captured that data. You don't know how that data was processed. You don't know why that data was important in the first place. So it's just orphanized data at this point, and there's nothing you can do about it.
yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And this debate about data warehouse versus data lake, so to me, I find it silly that, people are even having a debate. They should be one and the same. There is no, it should be all kinds of data, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, and it should be analytics ready. It should be ready for consumption when you need it, right? Now, so and it needs to be process aware, like, when your middleware processes, right, and data come together, then you get the lift that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's funny, right? I mean, you and I have been around long enough where it was just data storage, right?
Yeah,
Then people started creating data lakes and data warehouses, and now data lake houses. It used to be just the place that you put all your data.
yeah,
And we did
exactly.
Cognos cubes on top of those things.
Yeah, it is having that Google-like response on that data. Like, all of your data, you just throw them wherever I mean, like, into the warehouse, but it needs to be able to respond with the right kind of insight, right kind of information, and that's what that infrastructure is supposed to do, right? And
Yep.
it can be structured, it can be semi-structured, it can be unstructured, like, and you don't want to be worrying about, okay, let me make sense out of it. You just pump it all in and let the system figure that out, and combine that with the context of the business process. Now you have something more valuable.
Yep.
Yeah, Babu, going off what you were saying just there, one debate that keeps surfacing is whether a firm needs to build a data lake before it can do anything meaningful with agentic AI. You've seen this play out with actual clients. What's the real answer? Do firms need to pause and build infrastructure first, or is there a smarter path?
No, I would say, I mean, there is a purist in me saying that, okay, you need to build the foundation and then things you build it on top. So if you look at it from that perspective, you got to unify the data, you got to let insights come out of it, or you put the business process layer on top. These two together will give you the insights that you're looking for, and take it forward. But there are times when you're trying to solve a specific set of problems where you can do that without you can dynamically pull data in and kind of make those determinations as well. So if you're trying to solve for a really robust infrastructure, then I would say you start with the data, right? But if you trying to solve a point problem, that pain that you have today, then there may be solutions where you don't have to solve for the data, all of that data upfront.
Yeah, and to build on what Babu said, I think a lot of people look at this as like an insurmountable mountain, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, before I can actually get any value from agentic AI, I've got to like put together a data lake or a data warehouse or a data lake house or, and I've got to sort all this out. And the reality of it is every organization I've ever spoken with in my entire career, which has been long, has data problems. They all have data problems. And the reason is because, data is messy. Capturing the data can be messy from time to time. Normalizing the data, having the data talk across disparate systems can be very messy. So my recommendation to a lot of firms is you don't have to solve your data problem to start using artificial intelligence. You need to pick a use case where you don't have this insurmountable data problem associated with it day one, right? So, for example, if you're sitting there saying, "I'd love to get my custodian data, my financial planning data, and my CRM data all in a data warehouse, and then be able to have an agent tell me anything I wanted to know about any of my clients," that's great. Is your data fully populated? Is your data really clean? Do you have all the normalizations between them? If the answer to those questions is no, and by the way, if the answer to any of those questions is no, then that's probably not a great use case for you to start with, right? Because you're about to embark on a multi-year journey to get your data clean in a data lake and then build agents on top of it. Things are moving so fast, your competition will pass you by before you get that done. So a better approach to this would be pick some use cases where the data is relatively clean and can have a sizable project to just finish cleaning it up and then build some value off of it. Number one, you're going to learn a lot about this technology as you do that. You're going to get your data clean. You're probably going to now appoint a data steward, which is a role that you may not have, whose responsibility is to make sure that data is good moving forward. Then you're going to build an AI capability on top of that. You're going to learn a lot about artificial intelligence as you build that AI capability. So I don't think you need to solve all your data problems to start. I think pick a use case that is bite-sized that you can actually accomplish. Fix the data around that. Make sure you have someone that's going to own that data moving forward. Build an AI capability on top of it. Start getting some real value because that's what's going to get you funding to do your second AI project or your third AI project. You have to show a win. So I would start small, generate that quick win, and move forward from there.
Yeah, no, so um, as much as like it's like building a house where you decided you want a five bedroom house, but you wanted to do the first two-bedroom, but then extend sideways, right? Now you could, that's a great way, but the foundation on the first two, right, the two-bedroom, that foundation is data, like but you didn't have to solve for all of the data, like so you can be tactical in how you build your foundation. We are strong believers that you need the data framework, but how much of data and how you go about it you can be tactical about it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
John, walk us through what timely, personalized insights actually look like in the context of a client meeting. You used the example of a client asking about how global instability might affect their portfolio. What does it look like when an AI surfaces that kind of insight for an advisor in real time, tied to that specific client's situation?
So let's take a good example of this, right? I mean, if you're about to go into a client meeting today, you probably have email that went back and forth between you and the client. Today you have probably meeting notes because you've implemented a note taker in the year of the note takers. So you've got all that intelligence that's already there. Today, you probably already have a financial plan for that client, right? That means today you could use a light artificial intelligence capability to bring the financial plan in, look at the past 5 emails or 10 emails you got from the client, bring in the notes from the last couple of meetings you had with them, and use the AI to surface insights about that client. Now, some of those insights could be, hey, the client follows Ian Bremmer and is a globalist. He watches G
Yeah,
Zero and
yeah, that's
he
great.
knows Ian Bremmer, right?
Yeah,
Well, then guess what? They're probably going to ask you about some of the instability that we're seeing around the globe at this point, right? What does the Strait of Hormuz mean? Or what's going on with the war in the Ukraine? That's not going to be surprising to you when you go take a look at the data that you have.
yeah,
So it's just one more step for the artificial intelligence to say, okay, well, if these are the likely questions that this client may surface, what's the best way for me to answer them? Or give me 5 things that I can read before I get in front of the client that makes me a little bit more comfortable with the conversation before I get in there. So I think any of those are a really great example, right? And the data is out there. In most cases, you have it. You already have that data. By the way, did I say you needed to go interrogate your entire CRM to get this client insight? No. You've got email, you've got the notes from the past couple of meetings from a note taker, you got the financial plan. Bring that together, and you're probably going to have a much better meeting with that client. That's a good example of a bite-sized capability to bite off, right? You've already got the data, it's pretty well structured. You can bite that off and put together a light AI capability that'll make you much more effective in front of the client. And I just want to make one final point with that. Babu mentioned that it's all about the engagement, right? They're using the term engagement AI at Jiffy. What better way to drive a great engagement with your client, but then to go into the meeting much more prepared? You're going to feel more comfortable going into the meeting. You're going to feel like you're not going to get blindsided in the meeting by a client question. You're going to have a much better experience with the client. And that's what all this technology is supposed to do for you, is drive that better client experience. So I think I think that you can leverage things in bite-sized pieces to drive really impactful and meaningful change without boiling the ocean and trying to bring all your data together.
yeah. What we have seen recently, we've rolled out as part of our companion the ability to take a news and then analyze it for what it means for the client. What kind of questions the client or which all clients would you would want to reach out, because sometimes clients certain clients want to hear from you when certain things happen, right? So kind of how do you take what is happening around you and put that in the context of the client, and reach out or present insights to the not to every client. Sometimes certain clients, you're better off not scaring them on every up and down, like you, but you still need to know when, right? And AI can be a very useful guide to the advisor in how do you present that insight, put it in the context of that client, and then give guidance on who to reach out to, right? And how you bring that up. All of that presentation can be supported by AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Babu, for larger RIAs, firms pushing toward a billion and beyond, you've talked
Mm.
about the idea of owning your platform, not just your data. What does it look like when a firm uses AI to become a platform player in its own right? And what does that shift enable?
Yeah, so what has really changed? This is the fundamental shift in software. Like, there was a time, when the cost of building things, was pretty expensive, right? No, and only the multi-billion-dollar companies could afford, that kind of ownership, right? So industry has shifted from a build to a buy. uh, Now, with AI is enabling a lot more of build, right? But there also is, it is complicated still, right now. So every line of code that you write is a liability that, forever So if you can find that best of breed, right now, where you can own with there are platform capabilities, platforms out there, including what we do at JIFFYAI, that allows the uh, growing and scaling firms to be their own platform, if you will. Meaning, you can have much more control over your data, much more control over your business processes, and much more control over how effectively you can impact change. You can continue to innovate without almost on the fly, like, as and when you find the need, you're able to evolve much more rapidly than in the past. Finding that right balance is a lot more. There's work needed to find the right balance as to how much you own versus how much you delegate or buy, right? But it's a lot more possible today, especially if you're a $1 billion and above growing firm. You can have your own experience end to end, your own engagements, your own platform that manages that every business process, that helps you to serve the advisor and the investor really well. And that's much more possible today than ever. And that is continuing to get better and better. Like, where very personalized, specialized, very tailored experiences can be generated on a case by case basis. And these things were almost impossible to conceive, just a few years ago. Like, 5 to 7 years ago, it would have been an impossibility. Whereas now, it's very much a possibility where you can differentiate on how you manage the process, and how you communicate, how you interact, and have your own brand, if you will. Like, it's not just the logo that you put on a third-party software, right? But it is much more control over that end-to-end experience, is possible now.
I'm gonna bring that down one level to like a really concrete example, right? So let's say you wanted to build a client portal. And in that
Yeah.
client portal, all you really want to do is be able to show the client their current information and say, do you want to update this? Right? Take something very simple for a moment.
Yeah.
So what can we build? Well, you can build a front end to that, and then you can have a call from that front end to the CRM that says, let me pull that data out. So it pulls all the data out and it says to the client, could you please validate all this? Now, let's say the client says, oh, you know what? You've got my address wrong. Let me update my address, right? By the way, when Babu said control the experience, now let's take this one step further. Let's say you generate an email to each one of your clients and say, hey, we're just performing a quick annual update here this summer. Here's a personalized link for you to click on that is going to enable you to just confirm the information that we currently have for you. Client gets that link, clicks on it, comes to your personalized site, right? So, hi, Dylan Angner, very nice. Thanks for coming to the site. Here's what we have for you. Grabs that from the CRM. Now it's here. Client says, change them. I need to change the address. Traditionally, what would happen? Well, the client would tell the advisor they changed the address. The advisor would open up a service request, probably in the CRM, that would go to an operations team member. The operations team member would update the CRM and then go in and try to download a form for a change of address form from a custodian, fill out a form, usually in PDF, and then send that off to the custodian, right? Lots of people having to do stuff to do that. Now let's take it when you own that orchestration layer. The client changes the address on the front end. The orchestration layer automatically updates the CRM, populates a PDF file, and then transmits that to the custodian. Without your operations team having to do all this, without you opening up a service request. Oh, and by the way, you have traceability through the whole process from a compliance perspective. You know exactly the timestamp that the client updated everything. You have the timestamp that it was updated by the CRM and the source of that. You have a timestamp of when the PDF file was created and transmitted to the custodian. So you have complete traceability. You're owning that business process at that point. You're building that business process and owning it. That's a microcosmic example of all these things that you can build when you own the process layer. Okay. Otherwise, you're beholden to whatever CRM you're using, opening a service request, generating all this stuff, and having a lot of time spent with people doing that work. Those people could be freed up to do much more value-added tasks for the client, right? Now, if you've got 1,000 clients, imagine doing this 1,000 times. Where if you can automate it by owning that process layer, you could keep your data completely up to date or significantly more up to date than what it normally is, right? So I think that you unlock a lot of capability when you say, I want to own my own process layer. And unlocking that capability just gives you a whole host of ways to drive a much more personalized experience with the client without having to do a million integrations or have this mammoth support team behind driving that data set.
Yeah, well said, John. The only addition I would make is, so custodians, have this way of doing things, so you have to factor them in, like, and not every process starts at the CRM, like, it's a certain piece of data, the golden copy belongs to a certain player, like, whether it is a custodian, whether it's a financial planning system, whether it is a CRM system, etc. So depending on the context, so you have to go to that system, bring that piece of information, and then surface it, to the end investor very easily, make a simple change, and if the as part of that, you can if the custodians require that you work with require a signed paper,
You could generate the
DocuSign, you can
DocuSign.
surface it right there.
Of
Surface
course,
it
you
right.
can generate
Yeah,
the DocuSign and send it.
correct. And then orchestrate that and then deliver it all the way. That's how we do things, because there is a ideal state, and then there is a practical state, and then these two are always in tension with each other, right? Now, so, but I think our goal collectively should be to get to that promised land, and continue to make steps towards that. But being able to, surface all that experience and giving the client choices, right? Now, there are people, like, who love just simply telling your advisor, like, hey, I want to do this. That to me is like, takes 5 seconds to tell something,
Yep,
and so that need doesn't go away, like, but what the advisor needs is technology that will take that request and immediately do all this work and send a link back or something like that for that investor sign off, right now. And because ultimately you do want to make sure, like, for all the other parties, especially the custodians, as stewards of your financial assets, they would want to have the confidence that it actually did come from the client, on certain requests. So you need to be able to facilitate that. So, we deal with this all day. Like, there are about 70 different types of service requests, they where some form of data is with, but the master of that data is a particular system. So,
yep,
so it has this complex web of things, that you need to sort out, but it can be sorted out. You bring that in, simplify that process, and give the client that elevated experience, that almost just in time.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, John, you've pushed back on the idea that capturing every action item from a meeting creates more work for the advisor. What's your vision for what happens after a great client conversation, and where does the human actually need to be involved?
So I think that, capturing all of the data from a client meeting is outstanding, right? But it's the what do you do with it now that you've captured it that's the more challenging aspects of it. Like, so let's continue with the example that we were talking about a moment ago. Let's say the client to Babu's point, sometimes they like to tell the advisor, "Hey, I moved," or "I'm moving." You know what I mean? I want you to make an update to my accounts. So let's say that the client has announced that they're moving. They give the new address to the advisor in the meeting. The advisor may have to go out and change five different accounts, six different accounts to be able to do this, right? So capturing that is one thing. But if the workflow after capturing it is I have to open up five different service requests that are then going to spawn all these different DocuSign envelopes that are going to go to the client, that's not driving efficiency. You've actually just made a bunch of work, right? So and when I say made the work, you made the work of having to open up these multiple service requests for the transparency of the fact that the clients changed their address. The fact of the matter is the client changed the address and you just have to change all of these accounts. So a lot of times people, I think, are trying to capture every detail that came out of a client meeting without thinking about what's the operational impact off the back end of that. Would it be easier, by the way, if you captured just the one change of address and you made the change to Babu's point in whatever golden master data source that is? So if the client is giving you that information, you're probably going to update the CRM first and then try to update everything else because that's the easiest thing for you to control. Your workflow should be built around that kind of process then, where you're updating it once, it's spawning all of the change of address forms that are required, it's packaging them up in a DocuSign, it's sending it out to the client for the client to actually sign off on it. You really need to focus on what happens after these client meetings. So I think that there's two challenges people have. Number one, they capture everything expecting to have this traceability across every little detail. And then the reality of it is that you don't need traceability across every one of them. You need traceability from the source of where that change occurred. And then the second challenge that I think I see coming out of a lot of these is, you capture all this information in the client meeting. Not all of it is really relevant to your ability to provide the client a really great service. So what do you do with that data? Do you leave it as unstructured notes and you just try to process those unstructured notes later? Do you create custom fields in your data model, which a lot of firms wind up doing, creating custom fields in the data model, which then becomes sparsely populated fields, and you have no ability to leverage AI on top of that because they're sparsely populated. So, uh, you know, part of what this underscores is you don't have a role of a data steward or a data governance person within a lot of the firms, but firms say they want to own their data. So the first step is, if you're going to say you're going to own it, that means someone's responsibility is the care and feeding of this thing, this data. Who's that? If you can't answer that first, then just saying you want to own your data is kind of you're making a statement without the ability to actually back it up with any meaningful action. So if you're thinking about what you're doing with all the data coming out of your client meetings, really think about what you're going to do to action upon that data. If Don't create custom fields just around this whole thing, have some ability to be able to put it in a process flow and then action it coming out of the meeting.
Yeah, one of the things, John, even a simple use case like the change of address, for example, on an account, you know, um, the very first question you would ask is, did you realize that you have five accounts and two of them have a different address by purpose, right? Now, so not blindly take an request and go and act on it, like because the smartness in the system should be to ask that question. Hey, by the way, these two seem like you have a very specific reason why you're using a different address. You don't mean going and making that address a change, right? Now, client will appreciate that. Being thoughtful about that question and not blindly. The smarter systems, are supposed to help you, and even when you forget things, remind you and be that steward, if you will, the process and the data, right? And help you in that navigating that. That's what the clients want, and that's what the smarter systems, the AI systems are supposed to provide.
That comes back to that meeting prep example we discussed earlier in our webinar today, right? If
Yeah,
you're going into the meeting without having a really great preparation document in front of you, you don't even know that there are multiple addresses on the account. So what
yeah,
happens is the advisor comes out and says, the client wants to change this address on this account. The operations team member goes and looks at the data and says, do you realize they've got two different addresses across their accounts? Are we changing all of them or just changing the one? And the advisor goes, I don't know. They just mentioned this one account. So the operations team member or the advisor now needs to go back to the client and say, did you mean this one account? Because you have three accounts with the address that you just wanted to change and two other accounts with a different address. Do you want all of them changed? Do you want the three accounts to change or just the one account?
yeah,
Right? Without having any kind of preparation, or like you said, without going into that meeting without any intelligence around the meeting itself, you don't have the data.
yeah,
So you just listen to the client saying, yeah, I want to change that one account. And then you have to go back to the client, which degrades the client experience, more time on your team side, more effort on your team side to validate what the client probably thought was a pretty easy request.
yeah,
So the lack of data around this, it just makes the entire process much more cumbersome, both for your team and the client.
yeah. And then the same thing happens, when you're onboarding, like even today, like the best systems out there are sending you five. If you're opening up five, you're having a meaningful financial planning conversation, and then opening up five accounts. All of a sudden, here comes five DocuSigns for you to sign.
Right.
I mean, this happened to me. Like I was like, which ones did I sign? Which ones did I forget? Because these emails get buried under your 2,000 emails that you
We
handle,
had the
right?
same thing. We
Yeah,
moved five accounts. We got five different DocuSigns that I got. My wife got the same, because I sign it, then she signs it. Well, on one of them, we failed the LexisNexis for some reason, right?
yeah,
So then the entire process breaks. You're like, well, which accounts moved? Which accounts didn't move? Which one fit? There was a lot of email, probably 20 emails that went back and forth
yeah,
to do what really should have been a fairly easy thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Babu, as we wrap up here, for the firm sitting here thinking, I get the concept, but where do I actually start? What's the honest advice? What should they do first, and what should they be asking any AI vendor they're talking to?
Yeah, no. So I have a personal preference, so that'll drive. So I believe strongly in leaving a strong first impression, right? No, like when your and advice business is, if you're a good advisor, it's a lifelong relationship, and you want to start strong. You want to have a strong, leave a strong impression, and that professional, no apologies, hey, so I would start with onboarding because of that, planning and onboarding, that being a really great experience. And then soon after, like every interaction, leave the same impression, and same elevated feel that the client gets about that interaction. So that's what we focus on.
Yeah, that takes me to the end of my questions. We have a question from the audience here before we wrap up. I know we have like 5 minutes left, but I'll ask this question to both of you guys. We've been told we need to clean up our data before we can do anything with AI. How do you think about that? Is data quality a prerequisite, or can you start building workflows with what you have?
Yeah, I can take that. I think that there is an ideal world, and then there is a little bit more of a practical world. Ideally, I would say you need to clean up the data, because if you have garbage, that data is useless, right? No, so I recently I visited a industry partner, and they said, okay, hey, one of our clients, they created a data lake, or a data warehouse, but they don't know what is in it. The guy who did it, long gone, and they have no idea what is in it. So that's like, you don't even know what is in it, right? So then you have bad data. So cleaning that up is important, right? Now, so, but I would say depending on the context, so there are things that you could do. Like, for example, if you pick with respect to, for example, the core financial data, your custodian is going to be your source of record, right? Now, so. So you don't have to solve for everything day one. Like, you can start with the custodial data, and then augment your financial planning data, your CRM data, etc. And you could still make progress. So and custodial data generally, like, if you have a good process in place, can be very clean.
Yeah, I completely echo what Babu just said, right? There's the ideal world, and then there's what's more pragmatic, if you will. And I agree. I don't think you need to have all of your data completely clean. If you look across your data and nobody owns it today, the likelihood is it's not very clean, right? So again, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. Find that one use case that makes a lot of sense and move forward with that. You're going to start realizing that you need to have someone whose specific role is to own data and own its cleanliness. And that's not something that, many advisory firms recognize right up front. They're very focused on the operations team and on servicing their clients or their financial planning team. There's not They're not really focused on, well, who owns the data. So, and that may be someone in your, that may be someone in your operations team that owns the cleanliness of the CRM data, and they're going to reach out to the advisors to make sure things are up to date. Figuring that out, I think, is part of your data journey, if you will. And picking a small use case to get your feet wet is pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points. That brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you, John and Babu, for this in-depth and insightful conversation. Before we sign off, I want to let our audience know where they can find more information on both of your firms. Babu, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, jiffy.ai, like, my email address is babu@jiffy.ai, like, so simple, like, love to, any questions, love to hear from you.
John?
Excellent. And for the Oasis group, it's www.theoasisgrp.com. You can find our newsletter there. You can find our AI wealth tech map there. All of the articles that I've been published in, you can find them there. And of course, we have the hello@theoasisgrp.com. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate and reach out to us.
Fantastic. Thank you all for joining the webinar.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Dylan. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
John. It's great conversations. Thank you.
This was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Babu. Thank you,
All
Dylan.
all right.